Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A New Ireland, How Europe's Most Conservative Country Became Its Most Liberal, by Niall O'Dowd. Narrated by Roger Clark. Section 1. Introduction. Walk on air against your better judgment, Irish Nobel poet Seamus Heaney urged as his final epitaph. The Irish people took Heaney's advice and transformed a country that had long been a bastion of theocracy, so much so that the Church wrote significant parts of the 1937 Irish Constitution. How narrow was their thinking? In April 1944, Archbishop John McQuaid, the Catholic ruler of Ireland, as his biographer tagged him, wrote to an Irish minister in the Department of Health and informed him the bishops had met to discuss the arrival of Tampax into Ireland, and wanted the product banned on the grounds that insertion might stimulate women sexually. The government agreed and banned Tampax. McQuaid was obsessed with female genitalia. Shortly after, he used a magnifying glass to show a newspaper proprietor that the mons veneris of a woman was visible in a lady's underwear advertisement. This was the man who set the tenor of the times in Ireland for generations. Yet side by side with the prudish Victorian morality existed a heart of darkness in church-run schools and orphanages that would shock the world. The state could not claim innocence, as they were willing participants in the ghastly tableau. There was a vicious war against fallen women and their helpless offspring that defied all rational explanation. There was a separate dirty war against children by priest pedophiles, protected by the hierarchy as they ran amok, knowing their activities would be covered up. Gay people were targets too. Queer bashing had become a popular sport for young thugs, with no recourse for the bashed. Women's rights were almost non-existent, with the very words of the Constitution militating against them. Each year thousands fled to Britain for terminations, often as a result of rape and incest. And yet, somehow, despite the sepulchral gloom, Irish people found a way to transform and illuminate their society, which amazed the watching world. No people had ever done something quite like it. Seamus Heaney would have approved. It is a story for the ages. This is how they did it. Chapter 1. The Sins of the Fathers. He talked about the Irish institutions as being like concentration camps for children. Tom Lynch, Boys Town archivist, on Father Flanagan's view of Irish industrial schools and orphanages. Those looking for the seeds of what later became the near destruction of the Irish Church over child mistreatment and abuse would have found it in the clarion voice of Monsignor Edward Joseph Flanagan, the founder of Boys Town, made famous by the Spencer Tracy movie of the same name. The Irish-born Flanagan, though an international figure and beloved by all for his amazing work, found himself a forlorn voice when he travelled to Ireland to inspect their facilities for treating orphans and needy children. Flanagan's connection to Ireland was deep, and he knew what he spoke about. He was born on July 13th, 1886, in the townland of Leabeg, County Roscommon, to John, a herdsman, and Honoria Flanagan. In 1904 he immigrated to the United States, entered the priesthood, and in 1917 created Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska. From the start of his ordination, Flanagan made clear he would be a social reformer with special emphasis on children. At a time when child labour was common, he felt it was his mission to ensure that kids would be valued by the adult world and that those kids who were most in need were looked after. The Boys Town Centre was open to all. There were no fences to stop the boys from leaving. Father Flanagan said he was not building a prison. This is a home, he said. You do not wall in members of your own family. The 1938 movie Boys Town made a national hero out of Father Flanagan. In 1946, Father Flanagan decided to return to his birthland to visit his family and the so-called training schools run by the Christian Brothers. He wanted to see if they were truly a success. With the success of the film Boys Town, Flanagan was treated like a celebrity upon his arrival back home. The Irish Independent wrote that Flanagan had succeeded against overwhelming odds, spurred on by the simple slogan, "There is no such thing as a bad boy." As quoted in History Ireland magazine in 2004, according to Flanagan expert Dr. Owen O'Sullivan of the Department of Social Studies in Trinity College, Dublin, Flanagan was not home to take a victory lap. The priest had a deep-rooted abhorrence of the institutionalization of children. His unique legacy was that Boys Town and the various projects that he initiated were to divert children away from punitive carceral institutions, which he believed damaged children, to self-regulating, empowering, open communities for young people of all creeds and races. Flanagan had made clear his problems with incarceration of children, which he believed was a traumatic experience that scarred them for life. He wrote to a fellow priest, "I am particularly interested in the juvenile problem. I would like to get their Irish Welfare Department reaction as to whether these so-called training schools conducted by the Christian Brothers are a success or a failure. My memory, and it is not very clear, is that they have not been very successful in developing individuality, Christian character, and manliness, because they are too much institutionalized. This, as you know, helps the good brothers and makes it easier for them." But Flanagan was plunged into despair about what he found in Ireland, especially the Victorian orphanages and reform schools where young offenders were sent. He found them a scandal, unchristlike, and wrong. He spoke to a large audience at a public lecture in Cork's Savoy Cinema and, according to Irish media reports, said, "You are the people who permit your children and the children of your communities to go into these institutions of punishment. You can do something about it. I do not believe that a child can be reformed by lock and key and bars, or that fear can ever develop a child's character." He even attacked the Christian Brothers, the teaching order founded in Ireland to educate the masses and revered as an institution. Tom Lynch, Boys Town archivist, told the late Mary Raftery, a journalist, who herself did incredible groundbreaking work on church scandal, it was very well known that he was shocked by what he discovered in Ireland. He talked about the Irish institutions as being like concentration camps for children. As Raftery subsequently wrote in the Irish Times in 2004, Flanagan had a profound sense of outrage at how children were treated within these institutions. His own words, written in 1947, summed up Flanagan's thoughts on Ireland and were repeated by Father Val J. Peter, one of his successors at Boys Town, in a letter to the Irish Times in 2002 on the topic of child abuse. Unjust incarceration, unequal distribution of physical punishment, both inside and outside the prisons and jails, and the institutionalization of little children, housed in great big factory-like places where individuality has been and is being snuffed out, with no development of the personality of the individual, and where little children become a great army of child slavery in the workshops, making money for the institutions which give to them a little food, a little clothing, very little recreation, and a doubtful education. As Raftery noted, it was this view of the institutions that had prompted Father Flanagan to describe them publicly as a disgrace to the nation, which received widespread press coverage. Father Flanagan was also supplied with documentation confirming the savage flogging of a child by Christian Brothers at the industrial school in Glynn, County Limerick. This material was sent by a deeply courageous local representative, Martin Maguire, who at the time demanded a public inquiry into the treatment of children in industrial schools. Gerard Fogarty, The child at the centre of the case died in 2007 at the age of 77. As reported by the Alliance Victim Support Group, Martin Maguire told Fogarty's story. He was flogged by a Christian brother for escaping from St. Joseph's Industrial School after being committed there for skipping school. The youngster ran away again the night of the flogging and walked through fields for 32 miles until he returned to his mother in Limerick City. Fogarty himself remembered, "By the time I got home, the bleeding on my back had stopped, and the blood had dried into my shirt. I must have been a terrible sight. My mother nearly tore the hair out of her head when she saw me." The Fogartys, along with almost 100 of their neighbours, arrived into Councillor Maguire's offices at his mill and bakery business on Francis Street. The councillor was so shocked by the boy's injuries that he wrote a letter to the Minister for Education just 2 days later in which he stated that it was his distasteful duty to draw your attention to what I consider is a matter of paramount public importance. He demanded to know if such a form of punishment was prescribed by law. The councillor was relentless in his demands for a public inquiry into industrial schools and borstal institutions. The Christian brother was quietly transferred, and Maguire was publicly denounced. Father Flanagan detested the same Christian Brothers, the organisation that educated almost every young male in Ireland. He compared them to Nazis. In 1947 he wrote in private correspondence, "We have no Christian Brotherhood here at Boystown. We did have them for 5 years, but they left after they found out that they could not punish the children and kick them around. We have punished the Nazis for their sins against society. We have punished the fascists for the same reason. I wonder what God's judgment will be with reference to those who hold the deposit of faith and who fail in their God-given stewardship of little children." The reaction to Flanagan from the powerful leaders of the theocratic state was as expected. Despite Flanagan's profile and the worldwide respect for his work, his words were utterly ignored. He was vilified and asked how dare he cast doubt on Ireland's leaders, both of church and state, who were fine upstanding men, and they were all men. They batted away Flanagan's broadside. The reaction in political Ireland was especially bilious. According to the parliamentary record, then Minister for Justice Gerald Boland sat in the Dáil, Ireland's parliament, that he was not disposed to take any notice of what Monsignor Flanagan said while he was in this country, because his statements were so exaggerated. Flanagan, appalled by the reception and hostility he faced, struck back, but it would be over 50 years before his words were borne out. He wrote an open letter to the Irish clergy and political leaders. "What you need over there is to have someone shake you loose from your smugness and satisfaction, and set an example by punishing those who are guilty of cruelty, ignorance, and neglect of their duties in high places. I wonder what God's judgment will be with reference to those who hold the deposit of faith and who fail in their God-given stewardship of little children." That judgment day was indeed coming. One could only imagine from his perch in Valhalla what Flanagan's reaction would have been as the scandals rolled by like tumbleweeds in a gale. "Told you so" would surely have been on the tip of his tongue. But not even he could have imagined the incredible scale and mountainous waves of change that would come rolling in, transforming his native country from theocracy to one of the most liberal thinking in the Western world. Chapter 2. The son of the bishop shows up. We've had a call from a man who says he wants to tell us about a boy in America who's the son of Bishop Eamon Casey. News editor, Irish Times. The beginning of the end that Flanagan predicted crept in decades later rather than announcing itself. January 1992 was a very busy month in Irish news. On the 30th of January, the Taoiseach, Prime Minister Charles Haughey, announced his resignation after it was proven he had tapped two Irish journalists' phones a decade before. Haughey had overcome several heaves to get rid of him, both from within his own party, Fianna Fáil, and from opposition benches. But the bugging scandal proved to be the end of a political Houdini. It should have been no surprise when news broke that his former Justice Minister, Sean Doherty, admitted he was not acting alone when bugging the phones of the journalists, but had kept Haughey informed. But it could never be proven unless Doherty came clean. Now Doherty had finally told the truth, thus ending the leadership of the most controversial Irish leader since Eamon de Valera. It was not the only major story. British Secretary of State Peter Brooke, one of the more enlightened and sympathetic proconsuls sent to Belfast, set in motion his April resignation after bizarrely singing the music hall ditty "Oh My Darling Clementine" on Irish television's top-rated programme The Late Late Show, just hours after a deadly IRA bombing had killed 7 Protestants. Unionists were outraged at the perceived failure to show proper respect, and his relationship with them suffered irretrievably. Brooke was clearly on borrowed time thereafter. Meanwhile, in Áras an Uachtaráin, the stately home of the Irish president in the Phoenix Park, Mary Robinson was finalising plans in 1992 to become the first ever Irish head of state to visit Belfast in early February. Her visit, she knew, would be a prelude to other trips there. In June 1993, she would meet and shake hands with Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams in a move that infuriated the British. They tried everything to prevent it, but, like Margaret Thatcher, Mary Robinson was not for turning. Both were momentous stories, and they were soon to be joined by the beginning of the biggest story of all in the era of modern Catholic Ireland. In his excellent memoir, Up with the Times, former Irish Times editor Conor Brady remembers the day the Catholic Church showed its first signs of collapse. He writes how the quiet newsroom of the Irish Times, on a gunmetal grey January day, usually a month when the news was scarce, suddenly came to life with a once-in-a-lifetime scoop. The duty editor picked up a ringing phone and heard an American voice on the other end. The man refused to identify himself, but stated he wanted to discuss the matter of a prominent bishop who had a son by an American woman who was now the caller's partner. The duty editor passed the story on to the news editor, John Armstrong. An hour or so later, Brady recalls Armstrong came to see him wearing a grim expression. According to his book, Up with the Times, he said, "We've had a call from a man who says he wants to tell us about a boy in America who's the son of Bishop Eamon Casey. This man's name is Arthur Pennell. He's the partner of a woman called Annie Murphy. She claims she had an affair of several years with the Bishop of Galway, Eamon Casey, and that he's the father of her child, Peter, who's now 17 years old. She wants to tell us the whole story. I had the impression that he wanted to get all this out into the open. He seemed under pressure himself." As Brady relates it, the American had put the woman on the phone. A check of the American address given by her worked out, and Annie Murphy lived at the Ridgefield, Connecticut address. The two editors agreed it was a case for their newly arrived U.S. correspondent, Conor O'Clery, a legendary figure known for getting it first and getting it right. Bishop Eamon Casey, too, was a legend. He first became known for his dedicated work with poor Irish immigrants in London, where a "no Irish need apply" mentality still existed. He was now 65 and a beloved figure who had always spoken out on Third World issues. In 1986, he was caught drunk driving and issued a frank apology, which only increased his popularity. As his Irish Times obituary noted, his social conscience and work rate, evident in Limerick, soon became apparent in London as he immersed himself in emigrant life. He became active in the Catholic Housing Aid Society, moving to London in 1963 to place it on a national footing at the invitation of Cardinal Heenan, then Archbishop of Westminster. He participated in a powerful BBC documentary, Cathy Come Home, highlighting homelessness, and in an RTE Raiarc documentary which featured his work in London. He was a church star and a hero among the Irish in London when, aged 42 years, he was made Bishop of Kerry in 1969. The obituary was also notable for the fact that its closing line was, "Bishop Casey is survived by his son, Peter." Chapter 3. Casey at the Bat for Pope. Young people of Ireland, I love you. Pope John Paul II in Galway, September 1979. Tellingly, in 1979, Casey had been one of 2 clerics who were chosen to speak before the Pope's arrival in Galway. Picked to stand alongside him was Father Michael Cleary, a Dublin pastor renowned for his communication skills. He had written a book titled The Singing Priest, which outlined his love of singing and music, and his ability to charm young people back to God. Both men, though of different vintage, had many similar pronouncements on the sacredness of marriage and the battle against those seeking divorce or legal abortion, and were seen as the most presentable among the Irish clergy on the Pope's visit. Both men also held dark secrets. All along they were breaking those same rules with utter abandonment, preaching about the evils of sex outside marriage while conducting secret affairs and molesting children themselves. The shocking news about Casey the molester was not made public until 2019. The beloved pastor who erred because he was human with Annie Murphy, and who had every major dignitary, including the Irish president, at his funeral, was an accused child molester. In addition to fathering a child with Annie Murphy, it has been revealed that he also allegedly abused 3 young girls, including his niece. Even in a country swamped with exposés of clerical abuse, the Casey case was astonishing. He has long been held in sympathetic regard because of his love affair, which was widely accepted as human foible, but raping young nieces was a different matter. But there was his niece, Patricia Donovan, telling the Irish Daily Mail that she was raped by Casey when she was just 5 years old and was sexually assaulted by the bishop for years to come. Donovan, now 56, said, "It was rape. Everything you imagine. It was the worst kind of abuse. It was horrific. I stopped being able long ago to find any words in the English language to describe what happened to me. It was one horrific thing after another." Both Casey and Cleary were fathers, not the ecclesiastical kind either, and both covered up scandalous relationships that would blow the Catholic Church apart in Ireland when their stories and others were told. Father Cleary was a twisted soul too. The singing priest built a wonderful facade, a father trendy figure who made a huge name for himself as an entertainer and cleric, seen as being in touch with young people. Just how much he was in touch came out later. Cleary also led from the front on the 1983 abortion referendum, promising fire and brimstone and hell against anyone who went against the Church's wishes. He was to be a leading church figure in the battle against divorce, which would lead to a referendum in 1995. Trendy, godly, a pathfinder to the church for young men and women, Cleary was a real star in the eyes of the hierarchy. After all that, he went home to his rectory, a handsome brick house on Mount Harold Terrace near fashionable Rathmines, where he had commenced an illegal affair with the housekeeper, Phyllis Hamilton. She was just 17 years old. Cleary was 34 when the affair started. Abused by her father, Phyllis was an easy mark for the smooth-talking celebrity padre. He had his own call-in radio show, had a TV interview program, and he was famous, all reasons why Phyllis was swept off her feet. She cooked for him, cared for him, slept with him, and bore him at least 2 children. A third child, a woman, now living in Florida, who is Hamilton's third child, was conceived from a rape by another priest. The unnamed third priest had found out about the relationship with Cleary and blackmailed her, according to her psychiatrist, Dr. Ivor Brown, to whom she gave permission to reveal the truth, but only after she died in 2001. Brown also revealed that despite desperate entreaties, Cleary refused to come clean that his housekeeper was the mother of his children, and insisted it be kept secret. But fellow clergy soon understood what was really going on in the rectory. The church surely knew toward the end. A friend of Hamilton and Cleary said, "In October 1993 I met with Monsignor Alex Stenson at the Archbishop's house, who agreed to meet in confidence. I told him about Michael, Phyllis, and their 2 sons, and their fears of public exposure. His view was that until Michael told the church directly, they could not offer him, or anyone else that may be involved, any support." And there the matter rested. Those were the 2 men of all the clerics in Ireland hand-picked to perform on stage and meet and greet Pope John Paul II on his historic trip to Ireland in 1979. As hundreds of thousands waited at Galway racetrack for the arrival of the first ever Pope to come to Ireland, it was the Casey and Cleary show, both in full flight, singing, praying, swaying to the gospel music, and then embracing the pontiff when he arrived. As journalist Kim Bielenberg wrote in the Irish Independent, like his friend Father Michael Cleary, who joined him as the warm-up act at the Papal Mass in Galway in 1979, Casey was the bridge between the fusty and reserved old world of the hierarchy, stuck in the 1950s, and the modern media world of sound bites, chat shows, and talk radio. Casey and Cleary, with their populist touch and crowd-pleasing manner, were seen at the time as standard-bearers for the more youthful church of the future. But this was to unravel in spectacular fashion when news emerged much later of their sons and lovers. Galway was the site where John Paul bellowed out what became the meme of his visit. "Young people of Ireland, I love you." But his speech echoed the uneasiness among church leaders that the vice-like grip on the young would loosen in an age of materialism, exploding technology, and failures to remember the unbroken bond with the past. John Paul had come for a reason, to prop up the conservative faith and doctrine that had ruled for centuries. His speech went directly at that theme. The religious and moral traditions of Ireland, the very soul of Ireland, will be challenged by the temptations that spare no society in our age. Like so many other young people in various parts of the world, you will be told that changes must be made, that you must have more freedom, that you should be different from your parents, and that the decisions about your lives depend on you and you alone. The lure of pleasure, to be had whenever and wherever it can be found, will be strong, and it may be presented to you as part of progress towards greater autonomy and freedom from rules. The desire to be free from external restraints may manifest itself very strongly in the sexual domain, since this is an area that is so closely tied to a human personality. The moral standards that the Church and society have held up to you for so long a time will be presented as obsolete and a hindrance to the full development of your own personality. Yes, dear young people, do not close your eyes to the moral sickness that stalks your society today, and from which your youth alone will not protect you. How many young people have already warped their consciences and have substituted the true joy of life with drugs, sex, alcohol, vandalism, and the empty pursuit of mere material possessions. Ironically, the moral sickness he feared was flanking him on the podium by the showrunners Bishop Casey and Father Cleary, who were among the cast of characters for the dreadful and seemingly never-ending scandals to come. Chapter 4. A Dead Pope and a Mystery Irishman. I want the Irishman. Get me the Irishman. Pope John Paul.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?